you've recently done also a work with the New York City Ballet, and it's about a Balanchine. Is it a poem that Balanchine wrote the poem? Am I right?
Yes, you're right. It was more than just a poem, though. He set the poem to music for Stravinsky's 64th birthday. They were wonderful friends, having done so many pieces together, and also both sort of, Russian expats, first living in France and in exile, and then eventually settling in the United States, going back and forth between Los Angeles and New York. So Mr. Balanchine comes out from New York in the 40s, and he is living in Beverly Hills, and Stravinsky is living in West Hollywood at the time, and they get together often for dinners, chit chat, pieces that they're working on together. And at one of these little celebrations for Stravinsky's 64th birthday, he presents this very short, funny song that he had written, a cappella, sang it, and gave the manuscript to Stravinsky. And Stravinsky liked it so much and was so touched that he said, "You should harmonize this, flesh it out for more voices." And Balanchine said, "I'm not the composer here." So Stravinsky took it upon himself. And that's not true. Balanchine actually was a composer. He had studied music in college at the same time that he was in the theater school in St. Petersburg studying dance, and was a wonderful musician. I mean, that's, I think, the biggest ingredient and key to understanding why his choreography is heads and tails better than anybody else's. He was a wonderful musician, really understood music, and could compose music. His father was a composer, and so Stravinsky harmonizes it for four voices and gives that manuscript back to Mr. Balanchine. And I got a copy of it in the 90s from the Harvard Library, where a lot of Stravinsky and Balanchine's personal effects and manuscripts lived.
Really?
And I started thinking, well, it was so lovely. And the idea that one master had given it to his friend, another master in another discipline, and that Stravinsky had harmonized it and given it back, it just seemed like it was begging to be something larger. So I started,
But so you just accidentally stumbled upon it, or is it known? Was it known that it was there?
It wasn't. It was barely known. There was one recording that existed that I hadn't yet heard when I found the manuscript, and it was like, it's 22 seconds long, so nobody was getting very excited about this thing except for me and maybe Robert Kraft, who was Stravinsky's personal assistant / conductor / academic advisor and biographer, everything. I mean, it would be like Petipa and Tchaikovsky co-writing a little piece of music. You would have to do something and to help get that out to the world. So I decided it should be the theme upon which I base variations. So it became a theme and variations. About 30 minutes long, and it was finally mounted almost a year ago. We're coming up. This May 5th will be the 1-year anniversary on the premiere.
Amazing.
But I had started writing the variations on Bernstein's piano in the Dakota when I was still working there, and I was already sort of picturing it in the pit coming out of the State Theater, which was 10 blocks south of the Dakota, and I could just imagine, what a glorious spot that would be. So back to your, how does it feel when you hear your music for the first time in rehearsal? That among all, from all my pieces, that one will always stand out as the most exciting moment, because it took 28 years to get it there. And to realize that and to persevere. And the choreographer that worked on it wasn't even born when I had started working on the piece.
Really? But
So that kind of journey, you know, and I had almost given up many times along the way. Just it was such a pinch me moment.
but now I want to know about the 28 years. Why did it take so long? Was it or is it just something that you didn't know how to make it work?
I wish I could say that was the answer, but at first the Balanchine Trust sadly was opposed to the idea.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They didn't. The woman who was running the trust did not think anybody would be interested in Mr. Balanchine's music. Didn't grant permission. So then it sort of died a bit, even though I had started sketching. And then somebody else came along and took over the Balanchine Trust. And she happened to love my work and was a big fan. So there was a different attitude at that point. And she granted me permission. It still took another 10 or 15 years to Peter Martins was running New York City Ballet from the time that Mr. Balanchine died in the 80s. And then the Me Too movement came along and Peter Martins was suddenly gone from the company, which created an opportunity. Wendy Whalen stepped in as co-artistic director, and she heard the little snippets, the little sketches that I had written, and fell in love with this whole idea, and was already sort of thinking in her head, like, oh, we're going to be doing this 50th anniversary of the Stravinsky Festival that Balanchine created in the early 70s. This would be a perfect place to do this world premiere. So I think it was partly fate, partly timing, you know, partly just perseverance and waiting for the moment. So
I love,
the moral is never give up if you really believe.
This really fascinates me. I love these stories of this type of thing, you know, that there's something that has to happen, but it takes time to happen. That is, you know, and this, like you say, the perseverance behind it and the patience and the belief, because it's a belief that it will work, that you had.